Hello, this is Susan with Colorful Expressions. Today we're going to make some collage papers or journal pages out of an ancient set of watercolors. I've already pre-wetted them because they're very hard to lift any other time. And when I say ancient, this is my childhood watercolor set. I remember my German grandmother and I going to the store and getting this set when I was about 6 years old. I'm now 60. So this is 54, 55 years old, something like that. 56, 57 years old. And I can't do my math, 52. And I've also got, now I am in use it up mode. If I don't use an art supply, I am going to use it somehow in order to use it up. I have 8 colors of Brusho pigment powders, and they're okay. I don't really like using them. These are the colors that I have. I actually swatched them, and as you can see, the pure colors make a pure band, and then the mixed colors like ultramarine blue actually has turquoise plus violet in it. The olive green has turquoise and orange in it and a little bit of yellow. The lime green has turquoise and yellow. And then, of course, your pure colors don't have mixtures. These seemed like a good idea at the time, but I haven't found any practical uses for them. So I'm going to use them to make tie-dye effects on colorful watercolor dyed pages. So it'll be kind of a tie-dye effect. Also, just to check it, to test it out, I recently bought a set of metallic paints at Jerry's Artorama. This is Soho brand. That's one of their store brands. And I swatched these out and they look really cool. I love that purple. So they are very fine and may make for some interesting color splashes as well, and a little hint of metallic. So that's the supplies I'm going to use. My ancient watercolor, my Brusho. I've got my pan down here. I'm going to show you. I get very watery and very wet paper. Also, the paper I'm using is this giant ream. It's a double ream of resume paper. It's cream, but it takes water very well. I've already dyed some. It's like there's no use using up my good white paper when I've got a ton of this, and I have plenty of paper for resumes, but my stack is this thick, so I'm using this up as well. I'm tired of all this stuff sitting around not being used. So that's what we're going to do. I also pulled out some book pages that I will dye. I use the book pages to soak up extra water in the pan. So the first time I did this, I used my deep pan, but the pages couldn't lie flat. And then the second time I tried to do this, I used a glass sheet. It was from a desk, an old desk, and it was a sheet of glass, and I did it on that, and that worked pretty well. But water did come off of the edge of the sheet of glass, so I have an old aluminum, very bent cookie sheet, and I have really good stainless steel cookie sheets when I actually want to make cookies. So, uh, so I really don't need this one. And that gives it a purpose as well. I've got some towels lying down beside me so that I can just get these off and lay them down on the floor behind my desk. I've already got paint all over myself. We haven't even started. All right. So the way I like to do these is put some water down on my surface and then add some paint and then put a piece of paper down and let it soak up the water. Then I put more water on top of the page and more paint. The two sides are pretty much dyed at once. I don't submerge them in the water. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me get my big old mop brush. These are Princeton Neptune water brushes for watercolor. This is a quill brush. They hold a ton of water, and I use them to spread my paints. But I'm also going to use, I've got 3 spray bottles with me today. So I get a lot of water out first. And then let's go with some cool colors first. And these paints are actually rather difficult to pick up. See how they are very old. So I got to work with them a little bit. This is kind of a Prussian blue color. And then right next to it, some purple. Let's get some purple in there. I'm trying to mix the colors a little bit so that I have a mottled effect. And then now that I've got it nice, good and wet and a lot of paint added, I just lay the sheet on top. And then we'll add paint and water on top. I don't want these to mix too much. I actually want the paints to be in separate. Here's it's a different shade of blue. And also these dry a lot paler. So it may look like I've got something crazy going on, but it'll be fairly pale because of all the water I'm using. Now that I've got a good amount of water down, I'm going to pull up my violet Brusho. These are pigment powders, like I said, water soluble. And what you do want to do, if you have these and you want to use them to dye paper, is to take your brush, get it nice and wet, and dissolve the crystals. They'll be extremely strong at first. And see where this is kind of pale? That's not wet all the way. So I'm going to dip it in some blue and then just wet it all the way through. Add some more blue here and there. And then take our and then you can flip it over. It's really, be very gentle when you're lifting this up because the paper will tear. See how pale it is on this side? So let's add more paint directly to it. You want to keep the color families on each side similar. If you did blue and purple on one side, then do blue and purple, or even maybe, or something similar, some fuchsia maybe. I'm just going to stick with blue for now. And let's get some ultramarine blue powder. And here's a pro tip. If these are very difficult to deal with, if you open the cap, you can get powder everywhere. Stick a hole in it and then stick a pin in the hole to stop it up, or a thumbtack. I have a T-pin and I have thumbtacks. And that makes these much easier to handle. And see how they're slowly dissolving. Give them a hand a little bit with your water brush. I know this looks really cool, but you don't want the grains on your page because it's going to come off on anything you put in that journal. And you don't want to get it on your hands. I mean, it will blend into the paper like a watercolor, but you don't want to have it loose in your journal because it could stain stuff that you don't want stained. We're going to add a little more water. And you can also lift it up, lift up your pan, let it drip a little bit. And then that's got some good variation. It's going to dry a lot paler, as you'll see when I show you the dry pages. I pick it up and let it drip. And I even brush it across the edge of the tray to get some extra paint. And then I go lay it down. I have a black towel, so you cannot see the mess that it makes. And I just wash the towel along with the dog towels or something so that it doesn't stain my regular clothes. So since we've got blue here, we're just going to continue with blue on our next page. Let it die, soak it up. Didn't put any more color on, not needed, that's not needed. Let's go with some, where is it? Where's my turquoise? Well, I guess I don't have turquoise. All right. Do ultramarine blue again. I have lots of purple and I really need some more blue. I also have a continuous sprayer for a little bit of a less strong stream. I want it all the way out to the edges. Do you ever try to get rid of an art supply because you want the storage container for something else? I've done that multiple times. This looks good. We're going to just quickly flip it over. This looks a little more calm. I'm going to add some ultramarine from my... These poor watercolors from my childhood are not strong at all. And the funny thing is, I must have mixed my paints even as a child because the ultramarine blue, the red, and the yellow are the most used colors out of this palette. They're the ones that actually show plastic on the bottom, whereas the other colors are all mostly solid. And I remember mixing them and ending up with mud in the middle of the tray. But, all right, let's do a spot of purple in the middle here. And we're not going for pretty. We're just going for color coverage because we want interesting textures. I'm just dipping it into, there we go. Pull it off the edge of the pan. These colors will also pool on your towel unless it's perfectly flat. Let them dry that way. Then I'll have a little dark spot in them. Now, if you want to change colors to something else, this is a good time to put down a bunch of book pages and let them soak up the rest of your water. If your book pages don't get dyed enough for your liking, you can always put them in another pan. Just let them soak it all up. Because these can, and book pages typically are very absorbent. They'll pull that water right up. Depending on the book, but I'm going to just drop these right next to me because I can reuse them. I need that blue. I have a hard time. I'm always playing with purples, greens, turquoises, and plain blue, not so much, which of course means I need it in my clean out my brush a little bit. You can also use your brush to sop up the water from around the edges and put it on your paper. And yes, your fingers are going to be a mess at the end of the day. It'll mostly come out. And I've got good old paper towel. And you don't need to be perfect unless you're switching to yellow, you know, from something dark. So we'll do that again. Wet it down. I think I'm going to go for my greens this time. I'm going to show you what I'm working with here. And for some reason, these paints just don't like to come up. I don't know if this is just because they're ancient or if they always did this. And I don't want to pull out my good Daniel Smith paints. That's too expensive. I'm not going to waste my high professional quality paints on making collage papers. The only time I would do that is if I had leftover paint that if I needed the container they were on or the palette. You know, I just leave them on the palette, let them dry, and reuse them, re-wet them next time I do a watercolor. If you're interested in watching me do watercolors, let me know. Just leave a comment below. I will probably be doing it because I do all kinds of arts. So, all right, we've got that. Now I'm going to add that lime green powder. Where is it? Lime, my favorite. One of my favorite colors, lime green. I love all the secondary colors. Lime green, turquoise, magenta, purple, orange. Since these are so strong, I think I'll probably be using more of these rather than the watercolor. Now what I'm going to do is get them all nice and wet and then put the paper on top and see how that looks. Okay, now I'm gonna get the top wet. It'll lay flat if you get the top wet after the bottom's been wetted, because then it seals itself to the page. We're going to put lime green on here again. And these are expensive. Well, they're not that expensive. They're about $5.59 or so, a little container like this. Excuse me. I'm going to add a little more yellow. Whoops. Didn't clean out my brush. Well, I'll clean it out on here. Usually after a painting session, if my palette's a mess, I'll clean it up. I don't like a very messy palette. I'm a little bit of a neat freak. In high school, I had a pottery class on second period, and it was either be clean or wear the clay for the rest of the day. And I learned how to not get clay all over myself. We had aprons, though. But even so, some people would be covered, and I would be very careful. All right. Now we're going to see what the other side looks like. Ooh, nice and bright. Spread it around a little bit. Make sure your edges are covered. A lot of times you'll have a lot of color in the center. So brush it out to the edges and all the edges of your paper. I do want fully colorful pages when I'm finished. I'm going to leave some of this Brusho. See how that works. Here we go. And even when there's a little bit of water, you can see that it'll run. All right. Pick it up. Drag it against the edge of the pan to get that water bead off. And go put it down. You'd be surprised at how pale it's going to be. I'm going to get some yellow and make it even more lime. Come on. Continuous sprayer's not continually spraying very well. All right, I'm going to move some of the water around. And dump a piece of paper on it. I like this chartreuse that it makes. That's the mixing of a very cool yellow with the greens, the green mixtures that had some blue in it too. And like I said, you will be surprised at how pale this is. It'll be a beautiful color though. All right. All right, I'm going to dye a bunch of other papers, but I'm going to speed it up so you can see my process and watch me have some fun. These wrinkles are actually good because that creates texture. If you want a smoother piece, spread your paint a little more thoroughly and make sure that your paper is lying completely flat to dry. But I want texture, wrinkles are fine. You can actually crumple it up, but be careful because the paper is very fragile when it's this wet. When these pigment powders came out, it seemed like every artist I followed on YouTube was using them. And one woman even had classes on how to use them instead of watercolor, which I don't know how light fast these are. I would put them in a journal. I wouldn't put these in a piece on the wall. I believe they're just really strong dye, kind of like your distress inks. You know, they're not rated to be light fast either. So now let's try the shimmer paints. I'm going to try a paint on the edge so I can just let it drip onto the page, onto the tray. I don't know if these will show up or not. I haven't even tested them. I do know they show up when you put them on watercolor. They're very pale, but once the watercolor dries, the pigment dries, you can see the shimmer come through. So we'll put some on the bottom first, and then we'll add more after I add some watercolor paints. I've got some pinkish red here. I think it may be just time to throw away this set of watercolors. They really don't do anything anymore. We'll just use our Brusho red. We'll see if this has any shimmer. Another way to get shimmer is to add in some very diluted metallic acrylic paint. You can dye papers with acrylic paint. I'll show you how to do it in an upcoming video. I have several videos planned on dyeing papers multiple ways. I've done dyeing with acrylic ink, with acrylic paint. You can do it with gouache. I have a set of very cheap gouache. I just did a color fastness test on it, and they are near transparent, so they're really not gouache. It's just a water soluble paint of some kind. It's like I said, I got a deal on it, which is, it's not a deal if it doesn't do what you want it to do. So beware of buying really cheap. Watch some reviews, which I should have done. But there was a set of 36 colors for not a lot of money, and I gave in to temptation. All right, let me see if I get just a little bit more. Oh, come on. This thing does not like to. Oh, there you can see the splatters. You can see the shimmer show up against the page. At least I can. I don't know. Can you see that? So hopefully the shimmer will show up. The drops will show up once it dries. All right, let's add some yellow to that and make a more orangey, orange red page. Maybe even a little bit of earth tone. Some red and some water. Let's see if we can. Yeah, that's fun. Too bad it's not safe to leave it like that. And that's the thing with the Brushos. You know, they advertise how they make these wonderful swirls, but what they don't talk about is that this stuff, this is pure pigment. And if any kind of media, if you were to gesso over it or stamp over it or any other wet media over those crystals, it will run and bleed and possibly ruin the effect that you're going for. Because all right, you'd be surprised at how pale this is going to look after it dries. My purple, my first purple one's almost dry. I'll show it to you. Won't be able to show the full stack until tomorrow. I'm filming this in several parts. Come on. My dog is growling. I don't have curtains on the front windows by the door, and he stands there like an old man telling everybody to get off his lawn. He's not even that old. He's only 2.5. All right, we're going to leave it like that. Let's see what the other side looks like. That's nice. It's a little pale. Let's try and pick up some more dye. So in the category of are the pigment powders worth it? I would say no. Absolutely not. The only thing they're really good for is this color spraying. Now, if that's what you want to use them for, that's great. I just think they're too expensive for that. If you want a decent set, let's see, that's probably cost me $60. I didn't buy them all at once. I bought them like one or two at a time as I went to the art shop. I don't think they're worth it. You can't really use them as a watercolor. Ooh, that's pretty. Can't really use them as a watercolor because they're not strong enough. Probably not white fast. They're a dye-based pigment. They are not, they don't have any pigment numbers like a professional watercolor. I'm running out of places to put my paper, so I'm going to wrap it up and sop up the last of my dye here. This Hooker's green was a really cool color. Let's see if I can get some shimmer. Onto my dictionary page. This dictionary was $2, and I use it to flatten my papers because it's huge, as you can see. It's bigger than an 8.5 by 11, and it's heavy. It's 3 inches thick. And so not only can I use pages out of it, but it's a really great way to flatten all of your dyed pages without having to break out the iron. I don't iron my clothes. I darn sure don't want to iron my my collage papers. Not to mention, if you use acrylic, putting iron on it's really not a good idea. That stuff's plastic. You don't want it to ruin your good iron that you use maybe once every 3 years. All right. So I'm going to let these dry, and then I will film a reveal on what they all look like when they are finished. Here are my pages on the floor. This carpet is ancient, and I'm going to, whoops, this carpet is ancient, and I'm going to change it eventually. So I don't care if I get paint on it. So it's the next day. It's snowing outside. Pretty, it's already got a couple of inches. And I have pressed these papers under my dictionary, so they're nice and flat. And this is what we came up with. And each side's a little bit different. And I also put on some shimmer, and in some of them it really shows up. I don't think I have any shimmer on that one. I like this one. The turquoise spot stayed without being granular. So I think the trick is to let the powder sit. And as you saw on my video, I kind of gave up on those watercolors. They just aren't pigmented enough anymore, and they don't come up enough to get a nice strong color. So the Brushos themselves are what most of this is, and I really like the strength of color that I got from them. This used the olive green, and I'll point out the shimmer when I find them. I'm looking for them. The reds were very strong. This one has shimmer on this side, and if you move it around, let's see if it's visible. I can't tell on that. Yeah, you can see it a little bit. So those shimmers really did work out. I love this color, this coral with a little bit of red. I'm going to remember. These are stacked pretty much in the order that we did them yesterday. I like this orange as well. This one has a lot of copper and bronze shimmer on it. Around the edges, it's all there. That'll look nice as a base for a journal page. This one has shimmer on this side, some copper. This one's more subtle, but you can see a little bit of it. And this one's a little bit darker, which is good. I like a variety. I love this color. It's not as bright as it was when we picked up the page out of the pan, but I love the variation in it. And here's the book pages that we used to sop up. These were mostly blank, so they'll be good for collage, for fodder. And these are just, and this one I might use as a roll-off page for a jelly print. We could jelly print on top of these. What we could do is use stencil jelly printing and make more pattern on top of pattern. This one has a little bit of shimmer on it as well, since it was in the bottom of the pan. I love these 2 pages. They're very dark. This one has a ton of shimmer on it. The thing is, I didn't see it, so I kept putting more and more and more on, and they're really more evident when it's dry. So these are the dyed papers for the day, and then we can embellish them further or just put them straight into, make a journal out of them. The plain pages here, these are going to be made into a journal, and I may make more now that I know how nice and strong the Brushos make. Then I'll use these to make more pages because I really like the results. I looked up Brusho. They are not considered archival. They're not considered light fast. If these get wet, the dye will come up. They are dye-based pigments. But on a junk journal, when you're gluing things onto it, etc., if you're painting over it, you might be painting with acrylic or with stencil. So that should be okay. So I'm real pleased with my stack of pages. And they did come out darker than I expected. This one was mostly watercolor, and it's the palest one. And then I used more and more Brusho, and the pages were very strong, which is what I personally like. I'm not into subtlety. I'm not into pastels. So I'm very happy with my stack of strongly colored pages. Now, the next time I do papers, I will use a different art supply until I work through things. I have an entire set of gouache that I did color swatches on, and it turns out that all of them are transparent. See these gouache? It's a set of 36 colors, and even the black, you can see the line. These are really not good quality gouache paints. Of course, it was a deal for 36 colors. It was only so much, and yeah, it's not really gouache. So I'm going to also use these to dye papers, or also to use with stencils to decorate plain papers. And so that's what I have for today, and hope you enjoyed it. And if there is a particular technique or art supply that you would like to see used to make collage papers and journal pages, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you.